Eleanor O'Neill, thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here.
For those who aren't familiar with your kind of career background, could you just describe your path into CS?
So I've been a CCO effectively at two companies headquartered respectively in London and in Oslo now. The reason I found the CCO role really interesting. I had been a CIO, and probably why I'm so passionate about the CCO role now is because I was the buyer for such a long time. I was on the receiving end of this service for such a long time. So as CIO, I was sold to, marketed to, and then obviously I dealt with a lot of CSMs and CCOs as a result. And one thing I saw was there was just this huge range of quality of delivery, quality of experiences in terms of enterprise software that was being delivered in the market. And during my time as CIO, I started to form opinions about what a good CCO looked like.
When you look at CCO roles out there, they're very few and far between, right? So why do you think there is that big lack of representation where we've got all of these people on the front lines in CS, but we still don't have the CCO representation?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And one that I gave quite a bit of thought to before I came to talk to you today, actually, because I know it's something you're eager to talk about. And I think it's an enormous question, to be honest. And I think there are so many different reasons for this. I think one part is what we've already talked about, which is it's just such a young role and not everybody knows what to do about it. And sometimes for some organizations, it's easier for them just to stick customer success. It's a revenue function, put it to the chief revenue officer. I don't have to think about it too much. That's one way to solve the problem. I think there's other elements at play, though. The lack of really crystal clear definition of what the role is. I also think the stage of company is really interesting around this role, and appreciation for what the role can bring to different aged companies, and particularly in early stage companies where you haven't quite got product market fit or product market fit is just about established. I think another element can be culture inside an organization, or the culture of the existing executive management team. Maybe they're not familiar with having a CCO in place, because a CCO that's working really fluidly and working really smoothly can take a huge burden away from the chief revenue officer. And when you get those two roles sitting side by side, where you've got a chief revenue officer really focused to aggressively pursue net new growth, so bringing in net new logos. So in that sort of world where you can get this chief revenue officer and their teams purely focused on closing the deal, not troubleshooting, not triaging, not trying to figure out any of that sort of stuff, but they're purely focusing on the growth revenue. And then you've got the CSM and the chief customer officer who can take the pain away of anything to do with things going wrong, or getting the customers right up to the cusp of expansion, and then passing over to the account manager to do negotiation and get the biggest possible revenue amount for that piece of the contract. That's when you get a spectacular dynamic. You've got a chief revenue officer who isn't stressed and thinking about triaging and all sort of stuff. You've got a chief customer officer working to their sweet spot. And I think that's probably one of the most compelling and strongest reasons for a CEO to listen to, why you would have both roles in place. If you can get that dynamic working and that dance working really, really well, it's a really elegant way to play to the market.
What's your favorite misconception about customer success?
That it's not a strategic function. That it doesn't have a strategic role in the business. That it doesn't need to be closely aligned with marketing. That it isn't a source of great, like a goldmine of marketing material. I so often see that customer success is beaten to the punch by the sales team when it comes to collateral for marketing. But as I said already, the customer success team sits so closely with the customer. They sit there so often with the wins. Like, they are the people in the room when the customer has those great big wins. And I see so many of those stories not get told. And when you're looking for great stories to put out onto LinkedIn or other kind of platforms, it's just they're great, like, emotional wins for both people on both sides of the equation, and so many people who want to tell those stories. So I think it's probably those two things, that it can't be a strategic function, that it's just a delivery function. When, as I've said already in this discussion, that there's so many ways it can be strategic, and that it has probably a bigger role to play in how we market to customers and generally.
Honestly, Eleanor, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom and inspiring others to to do what you've been able to do.
It's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Great to have the conversation.